I'd like to start by asking Ashley Oliver to stand up again, please, and take another round of applause. My heart's pounding a little hard there, Ashley. Thank you for that. I think maybe the simplest introduction I could give to Father Gregory Boyle is that if he had his way, and that if Nakima had her way and Brotherhood Inc. had their way, besides reaching deep into our checkbooks, we'd all reach deep into our own hearts and our minds and take a look at our own stereotypes, our own prejudices, and the one that I want to relate to you briefly here was when I had the chance to go to Homeboy Industries in Los Angeles. Nakima was driving this big old van. I was up in the front seat with her. It was full of the guys from Brotherhood and Phelan and some of the law students. We come around the corner of their beautiful building in LA, and there probably was 40 guys standing out in the parking lot, and I guess they were handing out jobs or something. But and I've spent my life working kind of on the streets of St. Paul and Minneapolis and a few other places, including LA. But the concept of tattoos was not something that I was fully aware of how extensive they could get on a man's head and face and ears and mustache and neck. And so anyway, pretty much all these 40 guys were covered like that. And my initial reaction was, I'm looking at Nakima going, so what, we're getting out of the van now or what? I'm looking around for Phelan, who's a large man, and I thought that'd be good to stand near him. And then I looked out again, and two of these guys were holding in their arms 1- and 2-year-old children, playing with them right on the edge of the parking lot. A couple other of them came out and greeted us and proceeded to give us a tour of this amazing program, an amazing facility, and amazing love. And the architect of all that is Father Gregory Boyle. Please welcome him tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nakima. Thank you, my brothers. Thank you, Ashley. Where is Ashley? There you are. Okay. You are the shape of God's heart. It's a privilege. I've always loved the connection with Brotherhood Inc. and Homeboy, and so it's indeed a privilege to be here. It's a privilege of my life for 30 years to have worked with gang members, and they've taught me everything of value. The day won't ever come when I am more noble, or I have more courage, or I am closer to God than the young men and women, thousands of them that I've come to know over the years at Homeboy Industries. People like Louis Bettis, who kind of runs the place. He, along with a couple homies, they run the place while I'm not there. Well, they run it when I am there too. So he's become something of a public speaker in his own right, and he likes doing it. And we went out to dinner a couple weeks ago, and he was giving me tips on how to speak publicly. And he said, you have to pepper your talk with self-defecating humor. I said, yeah, no shit. So brace yourselves. The truth is, Homeboy Industries and Brotherhood Inc., you always have to brace yourself in a way, because you stand at the margins, which is the only way that margins get erased. If you stand at the margins, you look under your feet, occasionally they're erased, sometimes they're not, but you still stand out there. And people will accuse you of wasting your time. But the prophet Jeremiah writes, "In this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing." And that's what Brotherhood Inc. does for a living. And this is why you should absolutely double whatever number was in your mind earlier. Sure, go ahead. And so Brotherhood Inc. Wants to call people to imagine a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. It wants to dismantle the barriers that exclude. It wants to kind of go out to the edges where the poor and the powerless and the voiceless are and stand there. And people notice because you stand there. And you stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear, and you stand with those whose dignity has been denied, and you stand when you really feel privileged to be able to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out, with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop, and with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. The reason we say Black Lives Matter is because there's an idea that's taken root in the world, and it's at the root of all that's wrong with it. And the idea would be this, that there just might be lives out there that matter less than other lives. And so we choose to stand against that idea. Mother Teresa suggested that the problem in the world is that we've just forgotten that we belong to each other. So how do we stand against forgetting that? How do we imagine a community of kinship such that God, in fact, might recognize it? No kinship, no justice. No kinship, no peace. No matter how singularly focused we may well be on those worthy goals, they actually can't happen unless there's some undergirding sense that we belong to each other, that somehow we are connected, that we are kin. So indeed, the homies have taught me everything of value, and I'm so grateful to them. But last couple of years, they've taught me how to text, and I'm really grateful because I find it sure beats the heck out of actually talking to people. And so I'm pretty good at it, LOL and OMG and BTW, and the homies have taught me a new one, OHN, which apparently stands for, oh, hell no. And I've been using that one quite a bit lately. Autocorrect has really been screwing me up lately because, I sent a message. A homie said, "Hey, dog, can you help me out with my rent? I'm a little short." So I wanted to tell him that, I didn't really have enough money to be able to help him this week, maybe next week. And I typed, "Things are tight," and I pushed send. And autocorrect altered it to read, "Thongs are tight." And the homie wrote back, "Sorry to hear that. How about my rent?" Anyway, I digress. So I was in a car with two homies, older vatos, Manuel and Poncho, and they were going to help me give a talk somewhere. So they were sitting in a car, and Manuel was in the front seat. We're 15 minutes on the road, and Manuel gets an incoming text, and he reads it to himself, and he kind of chuckles. I said, "What is it?" He goes, "Oh, it's dumb. It's from Snoopy back at the office." Well, I'd just seen Snoopy. I just greeted him as the day began. And Snoopy and Manuel work together in the clock-in room where they clock in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gang members who work at Homeboy Industries. And it's a tough job because occasionally gang members can be attitudinal. So I said, well, what's he say? Oh, that's dumb. Hang on. Hey, dog, it's me, Snoops. Yeah, they got my ass locked up at county jail. They're charging me with being the ugliest vato in America. You have to come down right now, show them they got the wrong guy. We died laughing, I almost drove into oncoming traffic. And then I realized that Manuel and Snoopy are enemies. They're from rival gangs. They used to shoot bullets at each other. Now they shoot text messages. And there's a word for that, and the word is kinship. How do we obliterate once and for all the illusion that we are separate, that there is an us and a them? You know, even in service, we all want to be of service, but sometimes there's distance even in service. I'm the service provider, you're the service recipient. No, you want to bridge that gap. Service is the hallway that gets you into the ballroom. You want to get to the ballroom, which is the place of kinship. And if kinship was our goal, we would no longer be promoting justice. We'd be celebrating it. One of the great privileges of my life was knowing Cesar Chavez as a friend. And I can remember once he had famously told a reporter who had commented to him, wow, these farm workers, they sure love you. And Cesar just shrugged and smiled and said, the feeling's mutual, which of course is the goal. How do we arrive at that exquisite mutuality where there is no us and them, where there is no daylight that separates us, no kinship, no justice, no kinship, no peace. No homie found more job opportunities than this guy. Everybody called him Dreamer. I knew him since he was a little knucklehead growing up in the projects and got into a gang and got into trouble. Very smart kid, though. He never did school very much, but had a great, a dangerous sense of humor, which I always appreciated. But I always would find him job opportunities in those early years. But then he'd sort of gravitate back to vague criminality, usually something involving drugs, the sale of or the use of. Then he'd wander back to me. And he was a yo-yo for a while there in his early 20s, in and out of being locked up. Well, this one time he finished a 4-month stretch, probation violation, county jail. And there he is sitting in front of me in my office. And he says what gang members often say, this time it'll be different. And I go, okay. So with him sitting there, I call a friend of mine who runs a vending machine company in Alhambra, California. And he had hired homies in the past, and I think maybe he'll do it again. And sure enough, yeah, he says, yeah, tell him he can start tomorrow. That's a holy man right there. So Dreamer began working at this vending machine company, and 2 weeks later, there he is again in front of my desk. And I go, híjole, Madre Santa, here we go again. But this time he pulls out of his pocket his very first paycheck, and he waves it proudly, and he says, damn, G, this paycheck makes me feel proper. I mean, my mom, she's proud of me, and my kids, they're not ashamed of me. And you know who I have to thank for this job. And I said, well, gosh, who? And he looked at me strangely, and he said, well, God, of course. Oh, no, that's right. That would be God right there, yeah. He said, you thought I was going to say you. I said, no, gosh. God's number one, yeah. He said, you are so lucky we're not living in them Genesis days. I'm sorry, them Genesis days? He goes, yeah, because God would have been had struck down your ass already by now, he said. Well, we fell out of our chairs and we dissolved in laughter, and I defy you to identify exactly who's the service provider, who's the service recipient. It's mutual. So Homeboy Industries was born a long time ago in 1988 when I was pastor of the poorest parish in the city of Los Angeles. Nestled in the middle of two public housing projects, Pico Gardens, Aliso Village, the largest grouping of public housing west of Mississippi. We had 8 gangs at war with each other when I drove up, making it, according to the LAPD, the place of the highest concentration of gang activity anywhere in Los Angeles. I buried my first young person in 1988, killed because of the sadness, and buried my 199th last week. I count them because they matter. So we did a lot of things in those early days. We started a school because there were so many gang members not in school, junior high age, selling drugs and violent. So I walked out to them and I said, hey, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And to my surprise, they all said, yeah. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them, so that kind of forced my hand. And so across the street from our church was our elementary school, the first 2 floors, the parochial school. Well, the whole 3rd floor was the convent. So I went up to the convent and I gathered all the nuns in the living room and I said, hey, would you guys mind, moving out and we could turn the convent into like a school for gang members. And they said, sure. So they did, and gang members came in large numbers to this school, which upset the apple cart a little bit because aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed? Good people in and bad people out. So that was a good gospel challenge. And then they said if only we had jobs, and so myself and the women, we marched around the factories that surrounded the projects trying to find felony-friendly employers, and that wasn't so forthcoming. And then we started crews, different things, landscaping, maintenance, graffiti removal, a crew to build a child care center for the church. And then the unrest happened in 1992, and a movie producer came to me and said, how can I help? I said, well, buy this old abandoned bakery across the street from the church. It has ovens. We'll put hairnets on enemy rival gang members, and we'll call it Homeboy Bakery, which was the extent of my business plan. And we were off and running. And then a month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market in downtown LA. Once we had plural, we came up with the highfalutin name Homeboy Industries, as if there was any industry involved in this venture, and not everything worked. I'll be the first to admit it. Homeboy Plumbing really was not hugely successful. Who knew? People didn't want gang members in their homes. I did not see that coming. And nobody ever intends to do this, but we back our way into evolving our way into something. And so now we're the largest gang intervention rehab reentry program in the United States. So 15,000 folks a year walk through our doors, and all of them are trying to get into our 18-month training program where they have curricular activities and classes and case management and mental health therapy. Everybody's in therapy. It's a healing place of hope. Free tattoo removal. No place on the planet Earth removes more tattoos than we do. 50,000 laser treatments a year. And then we have all our social enterprises, solar panel installation training. We have Homeboy Bakeries thriving, Homeboy Silkscreen. So we need to work together on that too, because we've got a lot of equipment, and we've been doing that for 21 years, so they know a few things about it. Homeboy Diner, the only place you can get food at City Hall. We have a restaurant at LAX, American Airlines Terminal. We have what we call Homeboy Grocery, which is chips and salsas that we sell in all the Ralph stores in California. Homeboy Diner, Homeboy Lunch Truck, that's been around for about 6 months. Homeboy Homegirl Merchandise, where we sell our logo stuff. And Homegirl Cafe, where women with records, young ladies from rival gangs, waitresses with attitude will gladly take your order. It's kind of a famous place in LA. You know, if you go there for breakfast or lunch, you're going to run into somebody. Jim Carrey, the movie star, was there the other day. And Jack Black, another movie star. All the electeds go there. A couple months ago, with only 2 hours' notice, we got a phone call from the Secret Service. And Vice President Joe Biden wanted to go there for lunch, you know, and his motorcade and everything, and the homies were taking selfies with him. And well, I was on my annual 8-day retreat, so I wasn't there, you know. And so when I got back to the office, a homie was filling me in. While you were gone, we were visited by an MVP. I said, MVP? Do you mean a VIP? That one right there. VIP. He said, wow, gee, imagine here at Homeboy Industries, we were visited by the Vice President of the United States, Mick Romney. I swear to you, this is what, and it wasn't Mitt, it was Mick, you know. And I think he thought that mainly because all white people look alike. And if Barack Obama won the first slot, shouldn't the one who got the next number of votes become the vice president? So we think we might start a current affairs class now at Homeboy. Anyway, but famously, Diane Keaton showed up, a movie star, Annie Hall, Academy Award, Godfather movies, big movie star. She was there for lunch. And her waitress was Glinda. And Glinda, homegirl, big girl, tattooed, gang member, felon, parolee. She has no clue who Diane Keaton is, you know, and so she's taking her order. And Diane Keaton says, what do you recommend? And Glinda rattles off the 3 platillos that she particularly likes. And then Diane Keaton says, oh, I'll have that second one. That one sounds good. And it's at that moment something dawns on Glinda. She looks at Diane Keaton. She says, wait a minute. I feel like I know you. You know, like maybe we've met. And Diane Keaton decides to sort of deflect it humbly. Oh, I don't know. I suppose I have one of those faces that people think they've seen before. And then Glinda goes, no, now I know. We were locked up together. That's it. Yeah, boy, that just took my breath away when I heard it. And I don't believe we've had any further Diane Keaton sightings now that I think of it. But suddenly, kinship so quickly, Oscar-winning actress, attitudinal waitress, exactly what God had in mind. And we need go no further than hearing Jesus say to the gathered, that you may be one. I suppose he could have said more about himself, but it's really about us. All of us are called to be what Alice Miller, the late great child psychologist, called enlightened witnesses, people who through your kindness and tenderness and focused, attentive love return people to themselves. I think at Brotherhood, Inc., you don't hold the bar up and ask people to measure up. You just hold the mirror up and you tell people the truth, knowing that your truth is my truth and my truth is a gang member's truth, and it all happens to be the same truth. And here's the truth. You are exactly what God had in mind when God made you. And then you watch people become that truth, especially those who are standing out at the margins. Then they inhabit that truth. And no bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out. And death can't touch it because it's huge. But everybody knows you got to reach in and help and dismantle messages of shame and disgrace that get in the way, that keep people from seeing their truth. In the Acts of the Apostles, they have a line that says, "And awe came upon everyone." It is the measurement of health in any community at all. That if we stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than in judgment at how they carry it. Some years ago, I was invited to speak to 600 social workers at Richmond, Virginia. And I always say yes to things, and then I don't read the invitation very carefully. And so when I did, I kind of late, I noticed I'm probably going to give a keynote or something, maybe to open it, to close it. And I noticed it said, it's a 9 to 5 all-day gang in-service. I am to be the only speaker at this event. So I invited two homies into my office, Andre, African-American gang member who at the time worked in the bakery, and Jose, a Latino gang member who had worked his way up into our substance abuse department. I sat him down, I said, look, you're flying with me to Richmond, Virginia. I want you to get up and tell your stories. Take your time. Because we got a long-ass day to fill. Well, I hadn't heard their stories, and Jose got up, and Jose was in our 18-month program and started in the janitorial, what we call the humble place. Everybody starts there. And he worked his way up, a gang member, tattooed, parolee. But now he was solidly in his own recovery and was helping younger people, younger homies deal with their addiction issues. A man who spent a long time in prison, even though he was only 25 years old, had a long stretch as well as a homeless man and an even longer stretch as a heroin addict. And he got up and he began in sort of a self-effacing way. He said, I guess you could say my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I think I was 6 when my mom looked at me and she said, why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me. Well, 600 social workers gasped, and he says, it sounds way worser in Spanish. He said to them, you know, we got whiplash going from gasp to laugh. He said, I think I was 9 when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California, and she walked me up to an orphanage, and she knocked on the door, and when the guy came to the door, she said, I found this kid. And she left me there for 90 days until my grandmother could get out of her where she had dumped me. My grandmother came and rescued me. My mom beat me every single day of my elementary school years with things you could imagine and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day my back was bloodied and scarred. In fact, I had to wear 3 t-shirts to school every day. First t-shirt because the blood would seep through, and second t-shirt you could still see it. Finally, the third t-shirt, you couldn't see any blood. Kids at school, they'd make fun of me. Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts? And then he stopped speaking, so overwhelmed with emotion, and he seemed to be staring at a piece of his story that only he could see. And when he could speak again, he said, I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. And now I welcome my wounds. I run my fingers over my scars. My wounds are my friends. After all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds? And awe came upon everyone. The measure of our compassion lies not in our service of those on the margins, but only in our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with them. No kinship, no justice. No kinship, no peace. Let me just close with this. You know, people always ask about enemies working together, and that's part of the thing that happens. A homie will come in. Our program is not for those who need help. It's only for those who want it. You have to walk through the doors. But they'll come in and say, I'm ready, ready, ready. I'll say, okay, I have an opening in the bakery, but you have to work with X, Y, and Z. And I rattle off the names of enemies, rivals. And they always do the same thing. They think, and then they say, okay, I'll work with them, I'm not going to talk to them. And I remember how much in the early days, how much that bothered me, and until you discover, of course, that human beings can't demonize people they know. Humans can't sustain that. So I hired this guy, everybody called him Youngster. And Youngster was a little tiny guy, 19 years old. I thought he was ready. So I bring him to our Homeboy Silkscreen factory, which is a huge a kind of factory, kind of off campus. And again, has been around for 21 years. Thousands and thousands of enemy gang members have worked there. We usually have about 30 working there at any given time. And so I walked in and I introduced this guy to all his coworkers, and I watch him shake hands with each one, firm handshake, looks them in the eye. And there were a lot of enemies, a lot of rivals, and I think, wow, that's great. Until he gets to this last guy, a guy who seems to be wanting to avoid this encounter altogether, a kid everybody called Puppet. And when Puppet and Youngster are in each other's vicinity, they mumble something, they stare at their shoes, they don't shake hands. Well, I know they're enemies because I know what gangs they're from, but he just finished shaking hands with a whole bunch of enemies. I discover later that this is a hatred that's really quite deep and quite personal, beyond which neither of them think they can really get past. So I sense that much at the moment, and I say, hey, look, if you guys can't hang working together, let me know. I got a bunch of people who want this job, and they don't say a word. Well, 6 months later, Puppet leaves his home to go to a corner store some distance from his house, and he buys something. And on the way home, for some reason, he decides to take a shortcut. So he dodges into an alley, and because he took this detour, suddenly, unexpectedly, he's surrounded by 10 members of a rival gang, 10 against 1, and they beat him badly. And he falls to the ground, and while he's lying there, they will not stop kicking his head until he's lifeless. Somebody finds his body and takes him to White Memorial Hospital, where he's declared effectively brain dead. But it's the policy there to keep you connected to machines for 48 hours so that you can get 2 full days of a flat read where there's no brain activity. And then the doctors can sign the death certificate, making it official. This allowed family and friends to gather. I was in St. Louis giving a talk. I flew home immediately. I've seen a lot of horrible things in my life, but nothing to compare to the sight of this young man with his head swollen many times its size. It was horrifying. You could barely train your eyes on him. So at the end of the 2 days, as a priest, I said a blessing prayer. We anointed his forehead with oil. We disconnected, and a week later we buried him. But in the first 24 hours, while Puppet was lying beaten in the hospital, I was alone in my office. It was 8:30 at night, and the phone rang. And it was Youngster, Puppet's coworker from the silkscreen factory. Hey, he says, that's messed up about what happened to Puppet. I said, yeah, it is. And then with a certain kind of eagerness even, he says, is there anything I can do? Can I give him my blood? Then we both fall silent under the weight of it. Until finally, he breaks the silence, choking back his tears. And he says with great deliberation, he was not my enemy. He was my friend. We worked together. Now, can I say that always happens at Homeboy Industries and at Brotherhood Inc.? Yes, of course. Any exceptions? No. And it shouldn't surprise us that God's own dream come true for us, that we be one, just happens to be our own deepest longing for ourselves. For it turns out it's mutual. And so you stand at the edges, at the margins, and occasionally you look under your feet and the margins have been erased because you chose to stand there, but sometimes not. But you always will brace yourself because people will accuse you of wasting your time. But in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. And each and every one of you tonight is here because you want to make those voices heard. And may God bless you in doing it. Thank you very much.